Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, a podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm your host, Kate DeRocher, a dating, relationship, and self-worth coach on a mission to help people build better relationships, starting with the one they have with themselves. In each episode, we'll dig deep, turn inwards, and embark on a transformative journey. Together, we'll break free from unhealthy patterns, rip through self-limiting beliefs, heal past wounds, and build unwavering self-worth, all to create healthier relationships as a result. Get ready to explore the wild, untapped potential within you. Are you ready to see just how wildly capable you are? Subscribe now and join us on this empowering adventure. Remember, your wildest capabilities await. Hi everyone, welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this episode, I'm going to dive into an important topic that serves as a crucial building block in laying the foundation for healthy connections: boundaries. We'll explore what they are, why they're critical, and practical steps for creating your own. Before we get into the specifics, let's first establish a common understanding of what boundaries even are. Essentially, boundaries are the invisible lines we draw around ourselves to define our emotional, physical, and mental limits. They serve as a guide for how we interact with the world and how we interact with others around us. Personal boundaries, or the act of setting boundaries, is a life skill that has been popularized by self-help authors and support groups since the mid-1980s. It's the practice of openly communicating and asserting personal values as a way to preserve and protect ourselves against having them compromised or broken. It's the practice of openly communicating and asserting personal values as a way to preserve and protect against having them compromised or violated. A boundary is a limit you set on what you will accept of another person's words or actions. But here's the important part. A boundary is how you respond to the other person crossing that invisible line. It is not what you place on the other person. You can't demand or force someone to behave in the way you want them to, or to do or not do certain things. You have no control over their actions, their thoughts, or their behaviors. And honestly, if you did, that'd be dangerously close to becoming an unhealthy, controlling relationship dynamic, which we, of course, don't want. What you do have control over, though, is yourself and how you respond once the other person crosses the line you've set and communicated. For example, if my friend raises their voice at me in an argument, I remove myself from the conversation for about 20 minutes or however long I need until we both are calm again. That is the action that I will take. It is not something I will demand for her to do. Okay, super important to know that all boundaries are really for you and how you will respond to different values being broken. Make sense? All right, now let's address a few other common misconceptions when it comes to boundaries. The first misconception that I thought myself and that a lot of people I work with think is that boundaries are bad. They're negative. They're too harsh. They keep people apart. The truth, you guys, is that healthy boundaries are created for keeping bad elements such as cruelty, abuse, harassment, or manipulation out of your life and relationships. Boundaries keep people together in a healthy way. Healthy boundaries help people communicate more effectively and work together, making people less likely to fight or to want to leave the relationship. If you've ever heard the saying, good fences make good neighbors, that's kind of the idea here. By having set guidelines or guardrails within your relationship, you help the people you interact with and the people you love know how to best respect and love you while you do the same for them in return. You cannot expect people to get it right all of the time, especially if you aren't telling them what your needs and expectations even are. So communicating your boundaries, gives your relationships a better shot at moving forward and remaining healthy. Boundaries are the cornerstone of healthy relationships, fostering mutual respect, understanding, and emotional safety. Another misconception is that boundaries are meant to be extremely strict. But the truth is that boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are not meant to keep people out, but rather they're doors that define acceptable behaviors and protect our well being so people can be let in, so people can become closer to us. I once dated a guy who had such strict boundaries, he perceived them as boundaries at least, that really were walls. He would set such strict guidelines on me that there was no way I could get to know him. There was no way I could get in. Our relationship never developed. It never got even past like the situationship stage. I've talked about this guy before. His boundaries were walls that he was using to keep people out. That is not what boundaries are for. They are not meant to be walls. It's also helpful to understand that boundaries come in various forms, including physical, emotional, and even time boundaries. Recognizing the different types of boundaries allows for a more nuanced approach to setting and maintaining them. For example, physical boundaries might involve personal space, while emotional boundaries could focus on expressing feelings and needs. Time boundaries are about allocating time for yourself and others in a way that aligns with your priorities. Some boundaries are ones that are for yourself, like not hitting that snooze button in the morning, and other boundaries will involve other people, like not being comfortable with your partner hanging out with someone that they're attracted to. And the last, not really misconception, but important thing to know about boundaries is that boundaries should be clear to the other person, to anybody else involved. Clarity with boundaries prevents misunderstandings and confusion, and hence helps prevent the process of setting a boundary with someone from turning negative. Like I kind of said a little bit ago, people can't read your mind. They can't guess what you need or what you value in a relationship, and they can't know what your expectations from them are unless you tell them. It is on you. It is your responsibility to teach people how to treat you, how to better love you, how to show up well for you, because they don't know right off the bat. We're all so different in the ways that we think and operate and the things that we need. So, what they need may be totally different from what you do. So, communicating with one another about those things is imperative if you want to build a stronger relationship. And you know what, you guys? The right people will want to learn. They'll want to hear about anything they're doing that may not be working for you or hurting you. And they will want to adjust those things to be a better friend or partner or family member. So instead of forcing the people in your life into the position of having to guess at what you need, which potentially sets them up for failure, talk them through it. Communicate. Share your boundaries with them. Set the relationship up for success through clear communication and watch how much easier boundaries get once you do master the communication aspect of them. On top of that, in conflicts, clear boundaries provide a reference point for resolution, making it easier to discuss issues and find compromises that respect and work for everyone involved. Communication is key, baby. All right. So, why do we need boundaries? The answer to why boundaries lies in maintaining a balance between giving and receiving, protecting our mental and emotional health, and fostering healthy connections at the same time. Boundaries provide a framework for navigating relationships, preventing burnout, and establishing a sense of autonomy. Healthy boundaries provide so many benefits in our lives. They help other people learn how to respect and love us better, like we just talked about. They improve our self-worth as we stand up for our values and needs. They prevent us from stretching ourselves too thin. They help us stay out of unhealthy relationships and situations. They create deeper respect and intimacy in relationships of any kind. They help us walk through conflict better, and they protect our mental health. In short, boundaries are essential for promoting individual well-being, fostering healthy relationships, and creating environments where people can thrive emotionally, mentally, and socially. So we've talked through what boundaries are and what they're not, and we've also gained a deeper understanding as to why boundaries are even needed in our lives and in our relationships to begin with. So let's switch gears a little bit to discuss how to create boundaries next. I want you all to know that setting boundaries isn't always straightforward and you aren't always going to do it perfectly. And that's more than okay. So many people face challenges such as fear of conflict, guilt, or the desire to please others when they set their own boundaries, especially when they first start to do so. I've had to set boundaries in my own life that left me feeling sick to my stomach, you guys, with guilt. I felt terrible. I knew the boundaries were necessary, and I knew that with time, they'd hopefully give that specific relationship the best shot at growing to be healthier, but I still felt awful about them. I felt like I was being too harsh. I was worried something bad would happen to the other person when we weren't in contact. I was stressed over what other people would perceive the action I'd taken as. It wasn't easy. But boundaries, like any other life skill, they take time and practice. To help you with this practice, especially when you're first starting out, it's important to understand that setting boundaries is an act of self care. Setting healthy boundaries is not selfish. In fact, it's often the act of setting boundaries that creates the most positive impact in both your own life and the other person's too. It helps as the dust from the relationship's fights and issues have a chance to settle and the skies can clear up long enough for you both to reflect and mend your behaviors. In this way, boundaries aren't just a form of self care, they're also a form of caring for the relationship and contributing to its long term success down the road, too. To create your own boundaries, first start with self reflection. Identify your own values, needs, and limits. You simply will not be able to set boundaries if you don't first know yourself intimately enough to be able to understand what those things within you even are. For example, I had no idea that I needed so much personal space during my week to recharge my batteries until I finally slowed down enough in my own life to recognize that I'm much less extroverted than I ever thought that I was. Once I discovered this, I was able to then better communicate that need, that boundary that I desired more alone time, and I was able to explain it to him in a way that didn't leave him feeling hurt or neglected. We would have never had that amazing conversation, and I would have never respected my own boundary had I not spent that time reflecting on myself and getting to know myself more deeply. So, reflect well and often. The next step in this process of building boundaries is communication. Once you know what your needs, expectations, values, and limits are, you then need to communicate them clearly and assertively with the other people in your life. I touched on this a bit already, but I really want you guys to understand how imperative the step of communication is in creating a boundary. Now, I'm not saying you need to sit every friend or person you meet down and run them through a list of your needs. That would be really odd and really exhausting. But what I am saying is that when someone does something that upsets or negatively affects you, then it's on you to communicate to them what your boundary is in regard to that circumstance. If your friend keeps calling you numerous times throughout the day and emotionally dumps all of their baggage onto you, and it's beginning to drain you and cause you to have a more difficult, more emotional day yourself, well, then it's time to lovingly tell your friend that you don't have the capacity to take numerous calls throughout the day and that you'd love to instead find a middle ground that works for you both. It's your responsibility to tell your friend that. When you're in the process of communicating these things, communicating your boundaries, there are two parts to that communication that I personally believe need to happen. First, you share with the other person what your value, need, or line is, and then you share with them what action you're going to take if that value, need, or line isn't respected. And then you talk through with them how you two can work together to find a common ground that works for you both. By including both of those things, you will better help the other person understand where you're coming from and know what you're even asking for. Like I said earlier, keep saying people aren't mind readers and they won't know how to love you in the way that you need right away. The healthy people in your life, the ones that are meant to stay in your life, will listen to those boundaries with respect and honor them without pushing back. They may have questions to better understand, sure, but if they fight back and get defensive or mean, then that's a different story. Now, let me just quickly say that this doesn't apply in situations of abuse. If someone is being abusive towards you in any way, you don't owe them any communication, and you definitely don't owe them any deeper explanation behind your boundaries. In those circumstances, removing yourself from the relationship quickly and effectively is your only step. It is your only goal. The communication and clear explanation, plus the desire to find a compromise with the other person, that is reserved for the people in your life who you want to maintain a relationship with or who you want to see the relationship with improve over time. Next, as you're setting boundaries, remember that establishing boundaries in relationships is a shared responsibility. Open communication, active listening, and mutual respect are vital components. It's essential to understand that boundaries are not about control, but they're about creating a space where both individuals can thrive. You can share with the other person what your limit is and how you're going to respond if that limit is crossed. And in response, they have every right to share with you their own limits and boundaries too. It's a two-way street. To illustrate this, my partner Bobby and I have very different ways and styles when it comes to handling conflict. I want to address the conflict in the moment. I'm ready for the disagreement. I'm ready to go. Bobby, on the other hand, needs time and space to process his thoughts and emotions before he's ready to talk things through with me. In order for both of our needs to be met when it comes to conflict, my need being communication and closeness, and Bobby's being time and space, opposite needs, we had to both set boundaries with each other and both learn how to care for one another's needs while also meeting our own needs too. Our solution, our middle ground to this, is that we take an hour or so after a fight to calm down. This helps Bobby's boundary be met. But at the same time, we don't wait any longer than just a couple of hours before we talk again. That time limit meets my boundary and allows for me to feel safe with the space that Bobby is needing to take. So just remember that boundaries go both ways. And often there does exist a middle ground where both people can have their needs and boundaries met and cared for. But in that same breath, if the other person is completely unwilling to respect your boundary or find a compromise with you, that's when the situation starts to look a little bit different. In that type of circumstance, the best thing you can do is to stick to your boundary and not allow yourself to step into the other person's reality. When the person you're setting a boundary with becomes outwardly upset or mean or belittling about that boundary that you've just shared with them, their goal, even if it likely is a subconscious goal and not one that they're even aware that they're chasing after, their goal is to get you to agree with and step into their reality. They want you to get angry too, to fight back, to behave in ways that aren't your best. And they want you to do this because when you do, it shows the world and themselves that, hey, you're no better than them. And who are you to try to hold them accountable by setting a boundary with them? Those are the subconscious thoughts that take place within a person when they fight back on your boundaries. There may even be cases where those thoughts and intentions aren't just subconscious. Maybe the other person is actually trying to manipulate you into breaking your own boundary or to stoop to their level. Either way, when you play into their escalated emotions or you allow yourself to get into that same escalation, you lose your power and you allow the other person to be the one in control. So do not step into their reality. Instead, keep your peace and stick to your boundary. Hopefully, the other person will come around with time. That's what I recommend you do when someone won't respect your setting of the boundary. But what do you do when someone breaks a boundary after it's been set? Dealing with someone who has crossed your boundaries can no doubt be challenging, but it's essential to address the situation assertively and maintain your well being. Here are some steps you can try the next time someone crosses a line. First, recognize and validate your own feelings. Acknowledge your emotions, even if the other person isn't, and recognize that it's okay to feel upset or violated when someone crosses your boundaries. Trust your instincts and prioritize your feelings first. Next, clearly communicate your boundary. If you haven't done so already, clearly communicate what your boundary is to that other person. Use that two-step model that I talked about earlier. Be specific about what behavior is unacceptable and explain how it makes you feel. Use I statements to express your feelings and avoid sounding accusatory. And with that, stay calm, but stay assertive. It's crucial to remain calm and assertive when you're communicating your boundaries and expressing the issue or your feelings. Do your best to approach the conversation with complete love and gentleness while also remaining assertive and not backing down from your needs. Avoid becoming aggressive or confrontational, as this will most likely escalate the situation when it doesn't necessarily need to be. Instead, focus on expressing your feelings and needs in a clear and composed manner. Then reinforce your boundary firmly. Clearly restate your boundaries and emphasize the importance of having them respected. Be firm in your stance and make it clear that crossing your boundary is not acceptable. After the boundary has been set and the consequence to it being broken is clear, you can then take any additional steps like reevaluating the relationship, seeking professional support, and practicing self-care, especially if that person continues to cross the line. Broken boundaries often create a lot of difficult emotions within us. both between us and the other person and within ourselves. Those emotions can be really hard to manage. So, work with a coach or a therapist that can help you process the incident in a healthy way. And give yourself some time to feel any emotions that come up from the boundary being crossed. Let yourself be angry, feel annoyed, cry, whatever you need to. But be sure to let those emotions out. And then consider reevaluating that relationship. It's true that boundaries can sometimes lead to ended relationships. But while you may lose some people through setting boundaries, you will also gain yourself. Honoring your boundaries increases the love, respect, and trust that you have in yourself as you show up for and have your own back each time you stand up for your needs and feelings. And if you ask me, gaining yourself is worth losing a few people who were never meant to continue with you on your journey anyway. As we wrap up today's exploration of building boundaries, remember that boundaries are not rigid rules, but dynamic guidelines for self preservation and meaningful connections. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Wildly Capable with Kate. I love talking about boundaries. It is something that I coach so many people through and something I've had to learn in my own life. If you have any questions or you like what I said, please leave me a comment on YouTube or shoot me a DM or comment on my Instagram at Coach Kate DeRocher. And if you want to explore coaching and learn how to strengthen these skills like setting boundaries, DM me the word capable on Instagram or TikTok and we will get started. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys here soon on Wildly Capable with Kate.